Welcome to Tough Conversations with David Wood, where play meets depth. We help teams and high-performing leaders like you to master your tough conversations so you succeed in your career and in your life. When we avoid tough conversations, we stay small. Teams stay disengaged, conflicted, and ultimately end up quitting. When we lean in and master our tough conversations, they become the defining moments that literally shape our careers, our relationships, and our lives. So let's dive in and master your next tough conversation so you can be the leader that you would follow. Let's play.
I held a gun up to my head and then had, for the first time in my life, a thought go through my mind: I want to live. And until that moment, I hadn't even realized it, but I had thought in terms of I want to die.
Welcome everybody to the Play for Real podcast. And I'm here with a very exciting guest. I know I'll say that probably every time, but it beats, this is a boring guest that you don't want to listen to. And that wouldn't be true. This is Torah Bontrager, who I just met at Camp Maverick with Yannick Silva, and she has an amazing story. Torah was raised traditional Amish, and she escaped Amish-ism at the age of 15 in the middle of the night with just what she could carry. She grew up in the US with no electricity, no cars, and speaks English as a second language. Last year, Torah founded the Amish Heritage Foundation, which is on a mission to overturn the landmark 1972 Supreme Court ruling that says basically that Amish parents can stop their children receiving an education beyond the 8th grade if they want to. Torah is the author of the memoir An Amish Girl in Manhattan, and to her knowledge, she's the first Amish escapee to graduate from an Ivy League school. Her story's been featured on MTV, Forbes magazine, Tim Ferriss's blog, Huffington Post, and now the Play for Real podcast. Welcome, Torah Bontrager.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
I'm really, I want to know about the escape. What was that like for you? How did it go down? No, let's start with what led up to the escape. What were you feeling that had you say, I have to run away in the middle of the night?
Well, I read as much as I could get my hands on, like every book out of our own library in the attic, wherever there were books in the house, I picked them up and read them. Some of the stories I read were the Boxcar Children. I mean, that's classic American literature. I don't know how many people know about it or not, but that was one of the stories that I read, and it was about these children who escaped from an orphanage in the middle of the night because they were being abused. And they found this little abandoned boxcar in the woods and made that their home. And that was the very, very first book that I read outside of the books that I was given as a first grader to learn how to read in. So I very much related to that story of growing up around adults who were not nurturing. So I did not have a good childhood at all. I was the oldest of what ended up being 11 kids. But even from the very beginning, I was the oldest saddled with adult responsibilities. I was responsible for my younger siblings. My mother and father did not have a good marriage. And my mother saw me as the other woman. I was my father's favorite child, and I was her competition.
Okay, so unhappy childhood, you've got a lot of responsibilities early. You're basically the mother of the family. And then your mother sees you as competition. And I'm imagining you were kind of miserable. Does miserable sound right, or is it something else?
So before I made my first attempt, I considered suicide. One evening I was coming back in from the field, and I thought, it was just such a peaceful evening. It was the perfect sunset and everything was just calm. And it was probably, one of the few days that I hadn't fought with my mother for 4 years straight. And I thought, today would be a good day to die. I held a gun up to my head and then had, for the first time in my life, a thought go through my mind: I want to live. And until that moment, I hadn't even realized it, but I had thought in terms of I want to die.
So you've got a few things against you. Like for anyone escaping, it's got to be hard. But you're 15, right? You've had this dream since you're 11. You're 15, so you're young. You are female. And in society, men are usually encouraged to go and do big things. You're Amish, and you're leaving your world, your community. You're not just leaving the house, but the whole community. And where did you go? Where does one go when she's 15 and Amish?
Yeah. Well, that was my second attempt, so I had a failed first attempt. So that night, part of the feelings, among other feelings, was that this time I'm going to be successful. Like, damn it. I don't care what happens. If my parents wake up or catch me as I'm sneaking out of the house, fuck it. I am going to make a break for it. They are not going to keep me back. I'm going to make a run for it, and that's it. I could not think of an alibi. Like, if I'm coming down from the stairs and my parents woke up for whatever reason, or I stepped on the wrong stair and it creaked because the night before I could not get that a couple steps to quit squeaking, no matter how much WD-40 I sprayed on it. And it was just...
So you're testing your equipment. You're like checking out your escape route and spraying the steps with WD-40 so that you're not going to get caught this time and brought back to a life of misery. You grabbed your stuff. You're left with $170 in cash, the clothes on your back. I assume you had a backpack of some kind.
I had like this little satchel, kind of like a mini, like a Chrome laptop size maybe kind of thing, where I put in a couple, personal items, toiletries. That was about it. Well, I had a couple uncles who had also escaped or left. One escaped literally, the other one sort of, I think it was more of a leaving rather than an escaping. And so I knew that the uncles would help me if I reached out to them. So that's to make a long story short. They said yes, of course. We'll give you a place to stay. Both of them. One lived in Montana and another lived in Wisconsin. When I had that failed first attempt, I was put under Amish house arrest, which meant I couldn't go anywhere without the supervision of an adult. Yeah, so my Wisconsin uncle ended up picking me up in the middle of the night. So I ran out of the house and he picked me up at a designated point down the road and drove me over to Wisconsin. He and his wife helped me get some English clothes and put me on a train out to Montana. So 4 days later, I was in Montana with the uncle there.
Wow. I'm getting this image of like a war story. This is like POW camp style. You've got someone, or escaping from a prison. You've got someone, and I'm going into prisons. Like next week, I'm going into a prison. It's intense. You've got to get out. You've got someone lined up to pick you up. They've got to get you normal clothes so you can blend in. And then I assume that they helped you with your new life. You basically live with them.
The Wisconsin and Montana uncle raped me repeatedly for the first year that I was out.
Wow. Okay. So there are a number of reactions to that, but you're saying both of them raped you?
The Montana uncle, within 3 weeks, less than a month, he was raping me repeatedly. And to this day, I don't know how often. I mean, and I was alone in his house. He was divorced in the middle of Montana.
And the other uncle? The other uncle as well?
Yeah. So what happened is I figured out how to escape from the Montana uncle. I went to the Wisconsin uncle, and the Montana uncle threatened me with death after the first time it happens. And so I went to the Wisconsin uncle, and the first time his wife went on an overnight business trip, he did the same thing. And at that point I was just like, this is just what uncles do. And I was in a very difficult position because if I quit going to school, I would lose my emancipation privileges. So I got emancipated at 16, which allowed me all the rights as an 18-year-old. So I did not get sent back to my parents. But if I was not in school, then those rights would be revoked. And there's a whole bunch of things that went through my head. One of which was, if I report the Wisconsin uncle, then the Montana uncle will kill me. So ultimately, why I didn't speak out, it was the fear of getting killed at the end.
Well, that would do it. So, amazing escape story. This is wild. And again, the metaphor comes back to me. I'm thinking if you can do that at the age of 15 and have the courage to go and find the life you want, then the rest of us don't have much of an excuse. So I
Well,
think you're an amazing role model for that.
thank you so much.
I want to know how this translates now to your mission in the world. Let's talk about that. So you had this situation where you're oppressed, you're actually under Amish house arrest for some time, you got all these responsibilities. Education is limited in the Amish world, and now you're trying to change that. Would you tell me about that?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't think about this, but there are actually girls and boys in the United States who are denied an education beyond the eighth grade, or if you're from an ultra-Orthodox Jewish family and you're a male, your secular education ends at grade 3. The boys have a third grade English language capability, not beyond that. And in the Amish, we also speak English as a second language, so that's not our first language. And this is all thanks to Wisconsin v. Yoder. That's a 1972 Supreme Court case that ruled in favor of a religion's rights over the rights of a living, breathing child in the U.S.
Religious parents are saying my kids won't get educated past a certain age. And then your viewpoint is that children have a right to education, and in fact, if their child says, "I want to be educated past age 8," then their viewpoint should override. Their desire should override the desire of the parents.
Well, if I'm going to frame it slightly differently, it's a violation of the Constitution is what our argument is. And we have a team of pro bono attorneys working with us on this. So, but we're arguing is that this is actually a violation of the Constitution. And so in that case, it's the responsibility of the state. It's the responsibility of the federal government to look out in the best interests of that child, of that citizen.
So you're saying the government should require that a child gets an education beyond the 8th grade. Parents can stop their kids being educated, and that's not fair, and you're doing something about it. You're looking to overturn a Supreme Court ruling so that kids can be and actually would be required to be educated until a higher age than they are now with their parents stopping them. So yeah. I respect that. I love that it was education, it was books that actually sparked you escaping, and you've gone on to get an Ivy League education, and you want all children to have access to education. So I respect that. I know you could use some money. You're yeah. doing a tour, and so do you want to tell people where they can go if they want to find out more about you, catch you live, or even donate some funds towards children getting access to education?
Yeah, they can go to amishheritage.org/tour or /donate. Either one of those will tell you a lot about the upcoming tour, and it'll tell you a lot more as well about all the details. If you're a detailed person who wants to get lost in that, you can go there and find out more about that. We're a registered 501c3. That's very important. Recognized by the IRS. Your contributions are tax deductible. Yeah.
Great. And say that URL one more time.
Amishheritage.org.
Great. Thank you, Torah. You've got an incredible story, and I really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
You've been listening to Tough Conversations with David Wood. Now it's action time. Mastering your tough conversations will have a major impact on your team, your company, and you as a high-performing executive or entrepreneur. If you're ready, request a discovery session with me. at playforreal.life so we can transform your team, your company, and you. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I would love you to help me spread this message of tough conversations in a very simple way. Just leave a public review at playforreal.life/podcast. And you may hear me read it out loud and thank you live on a future podcast. Now, let's play.